After what feels like far too long, we've actually got official information and how save data works. But if you take a look at the in-game description, it could be a little confusing, so we're tackling that today. What is going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Let's get right into it. In essence, the higher the difficulty of the chaos manifestation that you're running, the higher the cap of what you can do in your build. So what do we mean by cap? Well, each thing that you perform inside the chaos manifestation, whether it's epiphanying cards with divine epiphanies, removing cards, converting cards, they all have a certain point value associated with them. And the chaos manifestation cap is starting at level 30 for the tier 1, and every tier above that is going to add an additional 10 points towards your cap. Also, if you choose to run your chaos manifestation on nightmare difficulty, it is also going to further increase the cap by an additional 10. So a tier 1 chaos manifestation on normal mode has a cap of 30, whereas a tier 10 of chaos manifestation on nightmare mode is going to be increased by another 90 points for the tier increases and an additional 10 points for it being ran on nightmare mode for a cap of 130. Neutral cards, if you add them to your deck during your run, are going to account for 20 points, whereas monster cards account for a whopping 80 points, meaning that they're going to take up a large majority of your cap. If a card gets an epiphany bonus, then it's going to be in another 10 points. If a divine epiphany affects one of your cards, that is going to increase it by a further 20 points. When it comes to card removal, the first removal that you have is free and counts for 0 points. The second card is going to be a 10-point increase, the third card's 30 points, the fourth card is 50 points, and then the fifth card onward is going to count for 70 points too. In addition to these rules here and these point values for removing your cards, if you remove a starter card or a card with an epiphany, it's going to tack on an additional 20 points. Duplication follows the same exact rule. Your first duplication is free at 0 points, and then 10, 30, 50, and then 70 points for your fifth duplication onward. Do note that when you're duplicating cards, if they have something like an epiphany effect or a divine blessing effect on them, those point totals are going to also be tacked on to the duplication fee. So for instance, if you duplicate the card for the first time and it doesn't have any blessings on it, doesn't have a divine epiphany, it's going to be free. It's going to cost you 0 points to add that second version of that card to your deck. However, if your first duplication is something that has a divine blessing, which is 20 points of value, well, then you're going to be taking 20 points of value and adding it towards the limit. Card conversions, while a little bit rarer inside of chaos manifestation runs, traditionally coming from events, cost 10 points as well. A lot of these convert random cards from your deck into neutral cards, etc. These cost 10 points. But do note that if the card that you're converting has some sort of point affecting elements that we talked about previously, like divine blessings and epiphanies, those elements are also going to be counted towards your cap. And even if you end up removing the converted card from your deck, it still is going to count towards your cap. And the new forbidden cards that are being added with Season 1 are counting for 20 points, and it seems like they're always counted as 20 points. And even if you go over the cap of your save data limit, the game will not remove forbidden cards from your deck. And the final one here, and the trickiest one, is the notes on the save data rules. Even if the save data sets that you see two different decks look the same, the amount of points that you're using for those decks might be different. So what do we mean by this? Well, for instance, say you added a monster card temporarily to your character's deck during a chaos manifestation run, but you said, well, I don't want to keep this because it's worth 80 points of value. You can remove that card. However, you're still spending a removal of card acquisition ability, and that's still going to tax you based on however many times you've removed cards from your deck that run. In essence, if you add a card and then remove that card, even though the two decks at the end of the day might look the same, one of those decks had to actually spend points towards removing a card that was added during the run, whereas the other deck just never added the card and didn't have to spend points towards removing that card. And we can see these rules working in real time if you go ahead and take a look at a save data like this with this specific Malin build. It says that the faint memory point total is 50 points. So how did we arrive here? You take a look at this deck and it looks like there's a fair amount of cards here, and you would expect it to have a lot higher faint memory total. So there's a missing card first and foremost, which is going to be her base Flame Dragon Guardian shield skill. If you take a look at this here, it's one of the only cards missing, and it's one of the only cards that removed from this deck. So the first removal would be 0. However, it's a base card, so that's going to be 20 of our 50 points that show up in the Faint Memory. We also have Unity of Attack and Defense in here 3 times. The base version right here is just sitting here, totally fine with a normal Blessing, a normal Epiphany version. We copied it for the first time, which is free. We copied it a second time, which is 10 points, taking us from the 20 to the 30 out of 50. And then finally, we have Spirit of Armada, which has a Divine Blessing on it, which is draw a card, which is an additional 20 points, bringing us up to the grand total Faint Memory of 50 total points. And this might bring the question of, what about gear? How does that factor into the point total limit? Well, if you go ahead and you break this down and go into the Vivid Memory right here, Vivid Memory basically is just the description of nothing that's a base card, a base unique card, anything that's not epiphanied, anything that doesn't have a Divine Blessing on it, and gear does not count towards your base total points, meaning that you can rock as many legendaries and uniques as you want in your build, and it's not going to factor into your total overall limit on what you're building with your deck construction for any character in your team. So this is going to leave us with some pretty big rules when it comes to how can I get the best deck underneath my save data limit as much as humanly possible. What should we be doing? Number one, don't worry about your gear. We just talked about that. Gear's not factored in. But as you're going through your Chaos Manifestation runs, it is nice when you see stuff like neutral cards pop up, boss cards pop up, things with Divine Blessings on them. These are things you're going to need to avoid if you think you need to have the save data space to duplicate cards or remove cards from your deck throughout your run. For instance, if you add a neutral card in and then remove the neutral card, you're spending points on removing the card. If you add a monster card in and you end up removing that card, you're spending points on removing that card. And then this leaves us with Divine Blessing cards. Only pick up Divine Blessings that you actually think will be beneficial to you if you're thinking about using that save data outside of your Chaos Manifestation run. Because if the Divine Blessing is something simple like +1 resolve, +1 morale, and you don't really care about that specific benefit to that card, or maybe you plan on removing that card in general after you Divine a Blessing it, you're going to be spending a bunch of extra point totals towards your limit, putting that Divine Blessing in and then removing it afterwards, or just putting it in the first place takes up 20 extra single points towards your limit of your save data. And just like when we talked about how I approach my Chaos Manifestation runs, typically just don't be greedy. Avoid those neutral cards. The boss cards don't really matter. The monster cards don't really matter. Only take Divine Blessings that really benefit your build and your save loadout. Aim for the basics. Get the cards that actually benefit you. Aim for the things that are awesome and will help your build out, and remove the things that you don't want to have in your deck. If you want to see a full run about how I approach my Chaos Manifestation runs, and you have a little bit of spare time, you just want to hang out and chill, check that video out. Until then, guys, take care, God bless, and I'll catch you in the next one.